Crispin Glover, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Crispin Glover is an American actor, director, screenwriter, recording artist, publisher, and author. Crispin is well known for his portrayal of eccentric characters on screen such as George McFly in Back to the Future, Lane in River's Edge, Andy Warhol in The Doors, The Thin Man in the film adaptations of Charlie's Angels, Willard Stiles in the Willard remake, the Knave of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, Phil in Hot Tub Time Machine. Let's put it this way, he's been in over 50 movies. Crispin will be performing at the American Cinematheque Egyptian Theater this March 18th and 19th at 6712 Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. There he'll be previewing his newest film and his new book, Round My House. To learn more about my guest, visit crispinglover.com. Crispin, well, let's start off with your new book, Round My House. It's your first...
Yes, let me just say one thing that's slightly... I just want people to be clear. I'm not previewing the film in its entirety, a new movie. I'll be showing a preview for it, which is just a few minutes long. What I'll be showing will be two different feature films that I've directed, which are parts 1 and 2 of what will be a trilogy. The new film that I'm previewing is not part 3 of the trilogy, but it's a movie that I've directed and developed for many years. It's the first time my father, Bruce Glover, and I have ever acted together before. So I just wanted people to be clear on that. But I will be showing a preview of the new movie that I've completed principal photography on, and I'm very excited about that as well. And yes, I also will be debuting the publication of my newest old book called Round My House. It's a book that I made originally way back in 1985, and it's taken 31 years for my publishing company, Volcanic Eruptions, to publish it. And I basically am the reason for that. Volcanic Eruptions is doing business as, which is myself. So I'm looking forward for this book. It was actually the very first book that I'd ever wanted to publish, but it was a color book as opposed to a black and white book. And so I ended up publishing Rat Catching as my first book way back in 1988. And I published, this will be the 5th book that I've published. And one of the 5 books that I've published is not in print. So I'll currently have 4 books in print right now, being Rat Catching, Oak Mott, Concrete Inspection, and now finally I'm very happy to have Round My House.
So just to reiterate what Crispin said, he'll be previewing a preview for his newest film, not the actual movie, again at the American Cinematheque Egyptian Theater, March 18th and 19th. So you haven't published a book in over 20 years. I have no idea what the book's about. Crispin, what is it?
Well, it's funny. It's so recent. In fact, the book is at the printers and binders. It's a hardbound book. It's a 105-page full-color book, and the contents of the book were originally, well, it's taken from an old book from the 1800s, and I've reworked the book, the binding, to a different book from what it originally was. All of the books that I've published to date were done in this technique, mostly in the 1980s and early 90s. But this book in particular was made in 1985, so quite a long time ago. But there's things about making it that I remember like it just happened. And it's a book I've always liked. I perform the book in my shows. I have 2 different 1-hour dramatic narrations of 8 different books that I perform before the movies. the images from the books. These books are illustrated virtually on every page, and the images are projected behind me as I dramatically narrate the books. The show is an hour long, and there are two different shows. One show is before It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which is the film I'll be showing on Friday, March 18th at the Egyptian Theater, and I'll be performing Crispin Glover's Big Slideshow Part 2 on that night, and then I'll have a 1.5-hour Q&A, and then there'll be a book signing, and there'll be this edition of this book is going to be a limited first edition, so people that come to this show will get low numbers on the limited edition, first edition of this book. This will be the first show I'll be selling the books at. And then Saturday, I'll be performing Crispin Glover's Big Slideshow Part 1, and I'll be showing Part 1 of the trilogy called What Is It? Then there'll be a 1.5-hour Q&A and again, a book signing. And people might note that I show the books and the slideshows and the films in a backward order, but people do not have to see Part 1 before Part 2. And there are particular reasons why I show Part 2 first. So if people want to see both, they should go ahead and come to the Friday night show and see Part 2 first. And I explain during the Q&A why I do it in this order. It's not a standard, the way a trilogy often works these days with films is that a movie's made, it's kind of a big hit, and then they decide, oh, well, we should write another movie that kind of has things that people that like the first movie will like, and then they make a sequel to it. But these screenplays were written in certain ways separately from each other, so they're quite different from one another, and it's not the kind of thing where somebody has to see Part 1 before Part 2 in order to understand or experience what's going on.
Did you do the illustrations in the book?
Yes and no. The illustrations in the book, some are hand-drawn, but a lot of them are reworked illustrations or photographs from the 1800s. So it's a little bit hard to describe in audio, but the books feel as though they are, on some level, as though they were made in the 1800s, but in other ways, they don't look anything like something you would have seen made in the 1800s. But there are, like I say, illustrations and photographs from that time period that sometimes remain intact as to what the original illustration was, and sometimes they're quite altered, and then there are original illustrations as well. And this is true of the words. Sometimes there's original text from the book. Sometimes that text has been altered and changed around in order, and sometimes there's handwritten text. Some of the books around my house, for example, has virtually no text from the original book. It has certain chapter titles or titles at the top of the pages, but the content of the story and the words, other than these chapter titles, is completely originally written. And this book was written around images that I found. I still have them, collections of books from the 1800s that I thought had interesting illustrations and images in them, and then I guess, for lack of a better word, contextualized them into something different from what it originally was.
You have quite the interest in the past, don't you?
Well, I do. I tend toward liking, the integrity of workmanship. Something has happened where labor has become very costly in contemporary times. Something about the 1800s. I mean, I'm not sure of all of the socio-political implications, but labor was less expensive, maybe to detriment of people at large. Maybe not. I don't know, but probably people are making. Well, it's a large topic, but in any case, labor was less expensive, and you see more labor-intensive work in architecture and workmanship from this time period, and I do appreciate that.
Well, what about the new media, books on phones and such? What do you think of that medium?
Well, there's a value in it. I found that I've been reading more. I get books on my telephone. I travel a lot. I own, like I say, property in the Czech Republic where I've been shooting my newest film, and I've been there a lot in the last decade. And it's convenient to have text on my phone that if I'm on a plane or something, I'm not having to carry extra things around. So I like that aspect of digital media. And certain kinds of documentaries are very convenient to watch. But then there's something also, of course, to be said for a physical art piece that you hold in your hand, a graphic work that is something that you can look at and slowly page through with your hands that definitely has value. And the same with film shot on 35 millimeter film negative, or even a 16 millimeter film negative, or even 8 millimeter, super 8 millimeter negative. I'm a film advocate. Last year just started a not-for-profit organization in the Czech Republic with 5 Czech fellows. We purchased the 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter negative processing and positive processing equipment from Barrendorf Studios Film Laboratory, which went out of business the year before last. And that equipment now is at my property in the Czech Republic. It's a not-for-profit organization, and it will be a fully functioning 16 and 35 millimeter negative processing film laboratory. But this is a large project. It's not a small thing. But 35, all film has a value to it that cannot be replicated with digital capture. And it isn't to say that I'm bashing digital. Digital has incredibly important and valuable applications. My own films, my first 2 films, the ones that I'll be showing at the Egyptian, were captured on 16 millimeter negative, and then I had a digital intermediate, which was then blown up to a 35 millimeter positive print, which is what will be projected at the shows at the Egyptian Theater. And so, there's a merging of technologies, which I assume I will probably continue to do. With the laboratory, once it's running, conceivably, I could shoot a film on a 35 millimeter negative and do an old-fashioned straight to 35 millimeter positive print without any digital intermediate. But there are values in the digital intermediate, so I don't know if I would ever do that even if I had it readily available. I might. There might be something where I know that there is a quality to the negative to positive, straight from negative to positive print that is unique to a 35 millimeter negative to positive print. But everything is to be considered. And like I said, there's great value in digital capture as well. It's just they're different things, and they have different qualities that can be valued in different ways. I tend toward loving the experience of seeing a large projection of something that was shot on a 35 or even 16 millimeter negative, probably more than something that was captured digitally. But I'm sure I've had great experiences with watching projected images that were digitally collected as well.
There's a lack of warmth, it seems, though, with digital.
Well, it can be argued as to what the differentiations are. The film capture is a grain pattern that is, an alchemical or a chemical process of something that is a reflection of an image through a lens on a paper or an emulsion that is somehow organically reflecting exactly what the image was. A digital capture are, millions, I believe, of pixels that are electronic. So there's a lot of different elements that are happening when the eye is looking at a film, and film frames that are running through an analog projector that have, somebody could say warm, but warm also is a technical term used when doing color timing. And you could color time a film negative to be cold with a bluer tone, or warm with a red-orange tone. And you could do that with a digital image as well. You could color time that to be warm or cold. I understand what you mean, and using that term, it's poetically saying it's bringing something into you when you're looking at film, as opposed to digital, that has I would call it more something that's organic rather than warm, meaning there's a living quality to it. And that living quality, every grain pattern on every print, if we're just talking about a still image as opposed to a moving image, you can take two prints from the same negative, and the grain pattern is going to be slightly different. I mean, you'd have to take a magnifying glass and look at it, and say it's a picture of a hand. You'd see, far away looking at the hand, and then you'd go close up and you'd see these little, grains. And the grains are completely random, and they are organic elements that are natural causations from the chemistry on the paper or the emulsion. And a pixeled image, if you take the magnifying glass and look at the pixels, no matter what you've done from that original captured image, the pixel will be cloned to the exact amount on any copy that's made of it. And there is a value in that as well. But pixels have a different quality when coming into the brain than the grain pattern has. And on some level, the human has a perception of this. And it's not the only thing that happens with film, because film has frames, and there are the perception of a moving image comes when those frames are flashed quickly, which is different from what happens when there's a streaming of gradually changing images that are electronic pixels. There's something called flutter, and something called, forgetting the other name, but basically the shutter opens and closes very rapidly, which makes a dark and light quality blinking that is virtually imperceptible, but it has an hypnotic quality to it that probably on some level the human body is perceiving, and it has an effect, whereas a digital stream doesn't have that flutter. And again, these are minute elements that are difficult for someone to perceive unless they know about the technology of it, consciously perceived. But I believe that the human body definitely perceives it, and it is a different experience. I believe what's going to happen with film. I'm very happy about something that just happened, and it's kind of an interesting subject. George Lucas, of course, originally directed Star Wars on film, and then he was a great advocate for bringing in the digital technology, and digital technology has become both a huge source of the capture now of many movies that are made, and I think the vocabulary should be updated, that films that are shot on a film negative should be called films, and movies that are shot on a digital capture should be called motion pictures or movies. It's just more accurate, and there is a differentiation. I think that will probably happen at some time in the future. But what's interesting that, because I started this not-for-profit organization with these guys, we've also been concerned, as a lot of people, cinephiles that are involved in film negative, both restoration and interest, have concern about the continuance of motion picture film being made. I've always had confidence that it would continue to be made for a lot of different reasons. But, Fuji, for example, went out of business a couple of years ago. I shot my newest film on a Fuji negative. It's a beautiful film stock. My first film, the one I'll be showing at the Egyptian on Saturday, on the 19th, was the last film ever shot on Agva, because I shot it, even though it's my 10th anniversary of touring, it's the 20th anniversary of when I started shooting the film. I started shooting, in 1996, and Agva had just gone out of business. Agva was a German film stock, Fuji's Japanese film stock. And is that right? Or am I wrong? Now, I'm forgetting if it's...
Fuji sounds fairly Japanese.
Yeah, I think it is a Japanese film stock. It's an Asian film stock, but I think it's Japanese. I should know this, but it has a very beautiful green and blue quality to it, and the Agva film stock had a kind of pastel quality that was very beautiful, kind of a reddish quality, and Kodak also is an excellent stock. It has a more brown quality to it. But right now, Kodak is the only giant, big corporation that is currently making motion picture stock once Fuji went out of business. Although there's a new company that was it was started on a Kickstarter, or reinvigorated on a Kickstarter, which is an Italian company where people bought up an old Italian film manufacturing company, and they've just started making motion picture film stock there, which is a great thing. Because Kodak is gigantic, and when a film is made, film negative is made, it's a very complex process, and the factory that Kodak has is huge, meaning I don't know how big it is, but acres of land, and in order to make it financially viable for them to make their film negative stock, they have to have huge amounts of orders in order to justify financially to continue to make it. That's why I was glad when I heard about the Italian company, because it's a much smaller factory, and that means if the amount of film that needs to be ordered diminishes, they could supply something that would be necessary. But the good news, and this has back to do with George Lucas and Star Wars, is because they went back for the new Star Wars franchise to film after so many of the people got annoyed with the digital elements, just by the fact that they're going to be making these new Star Wars films, Kodak announced that they're definitely going to be staying in business and making film negatives. So it's funny that for the 30-whatever year cycle it's been since Star Wars came out, being shot on film, and then George Lucas helping to bring in digital, and then there kind of being a backlash against that and going back to film, and Kodak having the possibility of going bankrupt, and now has ended up being saved by Star Wars. It's a funny coincidence that happened.
That's the power of the Force, Crispin.
I suppose it is. Yeah, I mean, I know George Lucas has gotten a lot of heated controversy about him, but one definitely has to look at the fact that he directed some very interesting films. THX 1138, American Graffiti, and Star Wars are all very well made films, and then he created this franchise, which ultimately is, from what I can tell, the thing that's responsible for keeping film in production. So he actually has done a good service, and he helped to usher in digital, which has positive things about it as well. So there's controversy, but what it really is, the other thing that is valuable that he helped to usher in was an understanding, bringing in of Joseph Campbell's descriptions of the hero's journey story structure, which can be utilized in so many different ways. And of course, he publicly let it be known that he was basing his structure on Star Wars on the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, which was revealed in his 1948 book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. And that was extremely valuable as well. Maybe the most valuable thing of all, actually. Joseph Campbell's understanding and description of hero's journey story structure is one of the most fascinating topics that I can think of, and most valuable things, I think, for people to be aware of.
Crispin, your dad was a famous actor, of course, Bruce Glover, perhaps best known for playing the assassin Mr. Wint in Diamonds Are Forever. He was also in Chinatown, which was directed, of course, by Roman Polanski, probably my favorite director. He was in Gunsmoke, $6 Million Man. Your dad had an acting school. I think he was teaching acting in the 50s and the 70s. Did your dad teach you how to act?
Well, I formally studied elsewhere. I had formal studies from age 15 to 20 at two different acting schools. But of course, I never formally studied with my father. But of course, I grew up around my father, and there would be this talk of it. So I'm sure there was strong influence having to do with my thoughts and understandings of acting, but I formally trained elsewhere.
Well, why has it taken so long? Of course, you're going to be at the Cinematheque this weekend showing the trailer for this film with your father in it. Why has it been so long for you guys to get together and collaborate on something?
Well, actually, I had directed him in my second film. He's in It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which will be showing on Friday, the 18th. And we acted into other films that we were both in, but we had no scenes in either one of those films. So we had never, until I shot this, actually physically been acting in anything ever before. It just I don't know. It wasn't a planned or unplanned thing. Had it occurred before that, certainly it would have been a welcome thing to have had happen. But it is part of why I started developing it, is I thought it would be a good thing to have happen. My own films that I produce and direct are, it takes me a long time. You know, part of the reason that I call the company Volcanic Eruptions, metaphorically, if you think about a volcano and the magma that's deep below the surface and the construing of the energy and forces to actually cause the eruption takes some geological deep time. And I know that my own projects, my own books and films, for whatever reason, because I fund the things myself, I don't work corporately. The first film, What Is It? Most of the actors in the film have Down syndrome, but the film is not about Down syndrome at all. What it really is my psychological reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 or more years of filmmaking, where anything that can possibly make an audience member uncomfortable is necessarily excised, or that film will not be corporately funded or distributed. This is a very damaging thing because it's that moment.
Crispin, have you ever seen The Human Centipede? I mean, that's about as uncomfortable as film gets.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying that nothing ever comes through. Now, The Human Centipede is a horror genre. You can say, and there are interesting things about The Human Centipede conceptually, but there is something about a film that sits outside of a genre, that would be the horror genre, and a film that sits inside of the horror genre that is ascribed toward, you could say Psycho, and the scene in the shower is uncomfortable. And I think it is a good scene. Alfred Hitchcock is a great film director. But also I'm talking about the last 30-something years of corporately funded and distributed film. It's a very specific thing, so I should finish what I'm talking about, because my description of discomfort is slightly different from horror as being something that people are getting a thrill from the terror. It's a little bit different, and I'm not dismissing this Human Centipede. I think there was something interesting conceptually about that film, and I liked the fact that it did go into a territory of something genuinely grotesque, unlike a lot of current genre horror films. But anyhow, let me finish what I was saying. I was saying that it's very damaging when corporately funded and distributed movies ubiquitously excise that which truly makes people uncomfortable. And when I'm saying that, I'm meaning things that cause people to ask genuine, deep questions about the culture itself. And this is a damaging thing to excise from corporately funded and distributed films, because it's that moment when an audience member looks up at the screen and thinks to themselves, is this right what I'm watching? Is this wrong what I'm watching? Should I be here? Should the filmmaker have done this? What is it? And that's the title of the film. What is it that's taboo in the culture? what does it mean when the taboo has been ubiquitously excised? Again, it's a very damaging thing, because when people are asking genuine questions, this is something that is in the etymological description of the word education, means to learn from within. And when people are asking questions, they're having a genuinely educating experience. And to ubiquitously excise that possibility, it becomes a de-education for the culture. What is another word for de-education? It's, or the opposite of education, it's propaganda. And propaganda is what's happening in our corporately funded and distributed media. Now, like you say, bringing up that movie, or there are other movies that I think might even be better examples of times when things squeeze through, which is good. I applaud it. There are filmmakers that will work within the corporate system that have the temperament and the ability to negotiate and talk, and they'll push certain individualized, thoughtful, questioning elements forward. And I applaud it when somebody does that. But what I'm saying is that the majority of the work in corporately funded and distributed film is the opposite of that, and it shouldn't be. It should be the majority of filmmaking is something that's truly thoughtful and getting public discussion and education out.
Your company is Volcanic Eruptions. I was reading an article online from HollywoodReporter.com. They were interviewing Leah Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
Leah Thompson, of course, was obviously your co-star in Back to the Future.
Right.
She called you an odd duck, but a genius. You and her were reciting some lines together, and she came over to your house, and she was quite surprised because your apartment was all black lacquer floors, ceilings, everything.
That's
and the way you prepared.
Not 100% accurate, but it's a little.
Well.
And
she says the way you prepared for the scene, let me finish, was you both painted a volcano together, which brings us back to Volcanic Eruptions.
Right. Yeah, no, it's partially true. The part that's inaccurate is the floors are not black lacquered floors. They were wood floors. And it was in an old apartment building off of Hollywood Boulevard. I would have not been, and nor would I have wanted to paint the wood floors black. But the walls were black. That was the first apartment I had. I got permission from the building. I had to paint it back to white when I moved out. I had to agree to do that, which I did. And my second apartment, which I moved to, which was also on Hollywood Boulevard, or off of Hollywood Boulevard on a street called Whitley, same street called the Fontenoy, had the top floor, half of the top floor overlooking Hollywood Boulevard. I lived there for 7 years. And in that apartment, the walls were black. The ceiling was, by the end of when I was there, the ceiling was gold. I own a house now in the Silver Lake Hills. In this house, I reversed that final color combination, and what I have are that the highlights are gold and or copper, and the low lights are black. It was interesting at the time having the black walls. I liked that if you put artwork up, it kind of framed it in an interesting way. But I haven't had black walls since I moved out of the apartment at the Fontenoy in 1992. But I do have gold and copper walls. Although at my property in the Czech Republic, which I purchased 13 years ago now, that's a very complex color schemata because this is a building that was built in the 1600s, and there are excavations that have been going on for at least 10 years now of the frescoes that were originally painted. And the frescoes, the oldest fresco that's been restored is from the 1700s, which is of a Chinese garden. And the color palette tends toward being more pastel in that place. But black has interesting qualities to it. I'm less inclined these days to use black, although even at the chateau, certain doors and elements, black is something that I have in the chateau, but very sparingly. But yeah, I didn't know Leah Thompson that well, and I think it was like before we were shooting the scenes with where we were supposed to have been married for like 30 years or something, and I thought it would be a good idea to just paint a painting together and talk and what have you. It was a good experience. We painted a volcano, and yeah, it was just a simple way to make a kind of a connection, and it's not something I've employed it before or since, but I think it was actually a good thing to do.
Do you get performance anxiety, and do you prepare a special way when you're getting ready for a performance?
Well, the only way I would get any kind of anxiety would be if I was not prepared. If I was not prepared, then I just wouldn't do it, because that's the whole point. You have to be prepared. Once I'm prepared, then you can get a sort of a rush of, you're about to do something in front of people, what have you. But as long as you're prepared, then that's part of training. Is there are techniques that have to do with getting into your own psyche or thought process, so that you're not becoming aware, essentially, of the audience. If one is aware of an audience watching them, then that would be extremely anxiety-inducing. But that's a big part of going to acting school, is getting into the thought process of the character, living out that thought process in some organic fashion, so that it becomes true to life on one level or another. And I was definitely trained with that way of thinking about performance. So if I were to be unprepared and just kind of shoved out onto a stage, so to speak, with no preparation, I would probably just turn around and walk off the stage, because that would be very uncomfortable. But once I've prepared for something and I know what I'm doing and I've rehearsed and I'm ready to go, then it's something I've done long enough and trained for long enough to be confident in when I'm going out and doing something.
We have a question from the audience, from Michelle.
Good.
She says, I love Crispin Glover. River's Edge is one of my favorite movies ever. Can you ask him why he thinks that movie has such a strong cult following? And she also follows up, have you seen it recently, and what do you think about the movie so many years later?
It's a very good film. It's a film I'm very proud of. There actually are not that many films that I've acted in that I think are genuinely good pieces of cinema. There are some, but it's really quite rare. I mean, I'm hard. I have a hard discrimination of what I consider to be a truly excellent piece of cinema. Probably there are films that I'm in that other people would count as being a great piece of cinema that I would not. It doesn't mean I'm not happy that I'm in these movies, but I approach my acting career as that. It's especially since the year 2000 when I recognized that it was important for me to be funding my films by my salary that I make from my own filmmaking. This specifically happened when I needed to fund the second film, which we shot in the year 2000 and 2001, and I utilized the salary that I made from the first Charlie's Angels film to fund the film It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine. That's the film I'll be showing at the Egyptian on the first night, Friday, February 18th. I'm sorry, March 18th. And it was written by a man who's in the first film called What Is It? Although I'd actually met and had read his screenplay many years before I put Stephen C. Stewart, that's his name, into What Is It? I put Steve into What Is It in order to make his screenplay a sequel of sorts to What Is It? I recognized after I had edited what was initially going to be a short film of What Is It, that there were similar thematic elements in What Is It that I wasn't consciously thinking of it when I made it, but I could recognize that I had been influenced by knowing Stephen C. Stewart, having read his screenplay, and his screenplay does have taboo elements in it, things that genuinely cause discomfort and questioning by audience members. So it made sense for me to write Steve into What Is It, and then make his film as a sort of sequel, even though it was a totally self-standing piece. And really, when the whole trilogy is done, the best film of the trilogy will be Steve's film, It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine. And the reason I say it, I'm not meaning to dismiss What Is It, because I'm very proud of What Is It, but there's a certain emotional catharsis that happens with Steve's character. Steve was born with a severe case of cerebral palsy, and when his mother died, when he was in his early 20s, he was placed into a nursing home where he did not want to be. And the people that were taking care of him there would derisively call Steve an MR, a mental retard. Steve was difficult to understand. It's not a nice thing to call anybody a mental retard, but Steve was of normal intelligence, and the emotional turmoil that he must have gone through for the decade he was in that nursing home, I can't even begin to imagine. But when he got out of the nursing home, he wrote this screenplay in the style of the 1970s TV murder mystery movie of the week, wherein he's a bad guy. And because he wrote it in this specific genre style, as opposed to a standard autobiography, there are certain truths in his life that stand out against that genre, that become very clear as to something that was going on in his true life and psychology, and it's quite beautiful. And also physically, the production is quite beautiful. I co-directed the film with David Brothers, who had great ability at set construction, building, and designing, and my salary mostly went into the construction of the sets, but this was a very important character itself of the film, and I would never regret that. I essentially put all of the money that I made into, there were other elements of the production, but most of it went into those sets. We had to tear the sets down the day after we finished production. David lost the lease to the warehouse that we were shooting in. I had kind of an idea that I would later be able to reutilize the sets for other productions, but that was not to be. That shooting on sets is very expensive. I think people sometimes think it's a less expensive way of making movies. It is not unless you own the property and then you make multiple productions on that property by doing small changes to the sets. Well, this is what I realized and why I bought the property in the Czech Republic 13 years ago. And then I've built sets for the new production that's with my father. It's essentially like a backlot. It's on 18,000 square feet of what was the former horse stables of the chateau. And this is essentially now a backlot that I will be able to utilize for future productions, which I've also been simultaneously developing, so that those future productions will be less expensive. This is an extremely expensive production if I count all of the sets and all of that. But the idea is that by having this backlot, I will be able to make future productions at a much lower cost. In any case, River's Edge is a film that I am very proud of. It is a very well-written film. Tim Hunter did an excellent job with the casting and direction of the film, and it's a movie that I'm very proud of to this day. So yes, I very much like that film. I haven't watched it in a while, but there about probably, I can't remember the last time I watched it. It must have been more than a decade ago. But I have seen that film a number of times, and I, like I say, I do very much like that movie.
Another audience question here. When I lived in Arizona in 1999, Crispin was at a venue reading from some of his books. I remember that one was about how to catch a rat. Well, 2 weeks ago I found out that there was a rat in my house. Please ask him if he can offer a humane solution, and how should I catch this rat?
It's a funny question. The book he's talking about is the first book I published in 1988 called Rat Catching. The original book, it's an interesting one. As I was describing previously a little bit about the process of the book making, this is a book that I did utilize a fair amount of the original text that was in the book. It's the only book that I've made or published that actually still retains some of the character, or a lot of the character of what the original book was. My sense is that the book actually was kind of a big hit when it was published in the late 1800s in England, because I don't know, within the last 2 years I purchased another copy of that book, and I've been in England, and people have said, they had seen me on a talk show in the 80s talking about the book. A bookseller, I'd gone into an old bookstore, and he'd seen me and said, I had a copy of that book here in the shop, and he didn't have it anymore. But also the book, I have an original copy of it aside from the one that I altered, and then it's online. Somebody reprinted it online in a digital format. So somebody can actually go on and see what the original book looked like before my alteration. My books are all available at my shows and on CrispinGlover.com. But the original book has one small illustration at the preface, and otherwise it's completely a text book. My book is a completely illustrated book, and it goes into different directions, and it's quite different from what the original book was, although what the original book was essentially, I never read the entire book. I should. I have a copy of it now. But I got the sense of it, and it was a humorous look at the business of rat catching, and he goes into a lot of detail. But it's written with a strong sense of humor, and that element is retained in the altered book, although, again, the content goes into different areas and territories than the original book. But he had an interesting writing style, and when I perform the book, it's fun to perform the language of how it was originally written, and there is a sense of humor that the audience enjoys. he goes into details about rat catching that are quite brutal, and there's a morbid sense of humor that he had employed in it. My derivation of it goes into other things other than rats, other animals, and kind of the cruelty and indifference with which people can treat animals, and it keeps going closer to the human element, and actually into the human element in my reworking of the book. Probably he would have great descriptions of how to deal with rats. Of course, I was also in the film called Willard about rats, which was a complete coincidence. I was cast in that in 2003. I had made Rat Catching in 1984. I made it right before the new book I'm publishing, Around My House. But Rat Catching became the first book that I published. I wanted to publish Around My House way back in 1988 when I first published Rat Catching. But Rat Catching is a monochrome, black and white book. It was much less expensive to publish at the time. It's still more expensive to publish in color, but there are certain things that have made prices go down for various reasons. In any case, I also have had to deal with, I had a rat problem at my own house. So I've dealt with rats in different ways. It's not something that I think about a lot, but I worked with the rats in Willard. Oh, and when I was cast in it, I was thinking, well, if Willard doesn't do well, the sales of Rat Catching at least will go up. and they did. Rat Catching has always been my best-selling book. But they used a little bit of, in the title sequence of the film Willard, some images from the book. So that's a nice aside. It's terrible. I like rats. When they're domesticated animals, they're very intelligent, beautiful creatures. And when, unfortunately, because they're intelligent creatures, if they become a pest, it's a very difficult problem. And, they defecate where they eat. So it's a problem. And they break into things and eat food and cause damage. So at that point, unfortunately, you have to deal with them as a pest. And, there's different thoughts about what is the most humane. It may very well be that the old-fashioned rat trap that snaps closed upon the neck, which instantaneously kills the animal when it tries to eat the bait, may be the most humane. There might be some other thoughts about that, but it's an unfortunate reality.
Another question from the audience. I'd really like to know where he got the courage to just be himself and not give a shit about what people thought of him, even at a young age.
Well, I'm glad to think on some level that's what the perception is. It's not quite accurate. I do care. I'm a performer, and there's a public persona that's put out that is I have something to do with. I think it's a healthy way to think about if you're involved in performing in a public arena. I think it's very important to on some level, be able to disassociate your own personal self from the outward persona that is expressed and may share your own birth name. But even your birth name isn't actually you. Your interior self is something that is your own private entity. And to recognize that a public persona, which you have something to do with, is at the same time also, influenced by other exterior elements that you can have no control or thought over, which is okay. It's something that I think is very important to understand. So there's a business entity that shares my birth name of Crispin Glover that I have something to do with, and I can try to influence it in ways that I'd like to influence it, but there's always going to be differentiations from if I were in complete control of what that external business entity comes off to other people. But as far as what my interests are in that public entity, I have always artistically been interested in that which is unusual, thoughtful, and so if I can somehow manifest that into that public entity, then it's something that I am interested in helping to bring along. There are things that then can be put upon in public media that I don't have control of. I would perhaps like to control, but it's not possible or plausible to do it. So you have to just kind of say, okay, this is how it's going to come off in certain ways, and I can express what I can try to express within that. But one has to, I think, separate yourself. But I essentially feel pleased with what I feel the people that are enjoying that which I've been able to put forward get out of it. And that's a positive thing. And I continue to try to manifest that.
Okay, a good example of this projection to the audience, of course, would be your appearance, well-known, famous appearance on David Letterman. Now, I was watching your music video, Clowny Clown Clown, the other day.
Yes.
And I couldn't help but notice that Mr. Farr in that video is the very same character you were playing on the David Letterman show.
Well, I'm writing a book right now which is different from the books that I've published, which are my art books through volcanic eruptions. I'm writing a more standard text-oriented book. I'm on page 325 right now of that book. The main topic of the book is propaganda in the entertainment industry. And there are a lot of things that I've never publicly addressed, and it's time that I publicly address them. And this is part of what is within the book that I'm currently writing. Publicly, you're asking about the David Letterman show. What I, to date, have always stated is that I neither confirm nor deny that I was on the David Letterman show.
But you would confirm that you were dressed up in the same outfit as you were in Clowny Clown Clown, where you referred to the guy as Mr. Farr.
To date, always in public, I have neither confirmed nor denied that I was on the David Letterman show. Now, I'm writing about a lot of things in the book that I've not dealt with publicly. There's a lot of reasons that I'm doing this now because, and it has a little bit to do with the previous question as well, having to do with a certain kind of public perception or perhaps misinformation, disinformation. It's not that, though. There's things that are very serious issues that not just having to do with me, but serious issues having to do with the public at large and propaganda and the way that it works. And a lot of these elements relate and interrelate to each other. And I've known that for many years, I've known that I needed to write it out as opposed to speak about it because it isn't simple. There's complexities to it that require, like I said, I'm on page 325 and I've not finished writing it. Now, it's not just about what you're asking me about at that moment, but it has something to do with that and other things. that I have not been able to, and purposefully have not discussed in a verbal fashion in media, because it needs to be written out first before I address it, and specifically that question, in any other way than I neither confirm nor deny that I was on the David Letterman show. But it is something that I'm planning to deal with in much more clear description than that.
Political answer.
Well, it's a truthful answer, but there's a complexity. It's something I can see that it's actually very important at this point in time for me to truly get, so that people understand exactly a thought process that has to do with these things, and there's value to it. So but it has to be written. It's just, at least at first. Once it's been written out, then I can, because we could start talking about just that issue at the beginning of when we started talking, even before we started recording, and be talking for another hour after this, and it would still not be completely clear. So it's a thing about public media is that's different than a book, is that you can go in a book, you can go into great lengths and details as to what things mean, and in a public audio discussion, it opens a can of worms that causes way more problems than it will solve. And it's important that it's put forth properly in a clear manner before I say anything other than I neither confirm nor deny that I was on the David Letterman show. And I'm looking forward to it, because, like I say, I see great value in it, in the whole situation and the whole understanding of it. And I've always known that I need to write about that amongst other things having to do with Back to the Future and all kinds of things that I've had to be very careful about talking about in public discourse.
Well, we can chat about this after that book is completed, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can ask questions like, is David Letterman the clown? And, we can go into it.
Sure.
Another question from the audience here.
For the record, I like David Letterman, just to be clear, but go ahead.
And you were on his show many times, so I'm sure he likes you too. Rod Bowman sent me this question. Does Crispin prefer to play creeps, eccentrics, or is it typecast?
Well, it's a good question. It's funny, the word creep, I had never heard ascribed to any of the characters that I ever played until I was in Charlie's Angels, and Drew Barrymore, the name of the character in the script was the Thin Man. And Drew Barrymore, in the while it was being shot, improvised. I think she has a line to Lucy Liu's character saying, "Creepy thin man," and paraphrasing, "in the elevator, such and such a thing." And she just improvised that. She even asked me, she said, "Is that all right with you?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, no, that's fine." But I've noticed after that the word creepy has been ascribed to not just that character, but other characters that I've played. One of the things that an actor aspires towards is to be known for something or another. Now, the word creepy is a very particular thing. I don't think all of the characters that I've played are creepy necessarily. Some of them may very well be creepy, and that's fine. Ultimately, I aspire towards playing things that are interesting, bring forth thought although that's more having to do with what my own filmmaking is about. I think I started to say, but didn't finish the thread, when I accepted to do Charlie's Angels, I knew that I was going to be able to use the money to fund Steve Stewart's film. Cerebral palsy is not a degenerative disease, but Steve was older, and he was starting to choke on his own saliva. He'd already shot with him in What Is It? And in, I think it was 1999, one of his lungs collapsed from pneumonia. And it became apparent if we didn't shoot something soon, we may never get to shoot anything at all. And it was in the year 2000 that they started coming to me for the Charlie's Angels film, which several years before I probably would have turned the film down outright. And the character originally had dialogue in it. When I read the script, I wasn't initially going to go in on the meeting, but they were pretty persistent, and they said they wanted to hear what my thoughts and ideas about the character were. So I went into the meeting, and they asked me what I thought about the character, and I said I thought whether I played the character or not, that it should be a silent, fighting, antagonistic character. The lines that were written were expositional, meaning a character describing something that's happened that's external to the character's element. It's a writing device that is sometimes necessary and helpful in screenwriting, but for actors it's better if you don't have to speak exposition. It's difficult to make exposition feel organic. Well, when I said to McGee, I thought whether I played it or not, that it should be a silent, fighting, antagonistic character, he stood up, and he can be very enthusiastic. He says, "That's great. That's exactly what we're going to do. That's how we're going to do it." And then they showed me the footage of the Yun family, the Chinese fighting choreographers that were going to be choreographing my character. I'd seen some of their work. They do great cinematic work with psychological understanding of the character through movement. And I recognized that a silent character essentially being choreographed by these excellent movement choreographers would really be, could be very interesting. And I'm very pleased. I had more influence on that character than I've probably had on any other character, aside from maybe What Is It, which I wrote for myself, the character that I play, as I was expanding it into a feature as kind of a glue, as opposed to like as opposed to a character that was written to be a great character to play. Although I'm very pleased with the character in What Is It and the film itself. In any case, once I finished the film and I was able to go and shoot Everything Is Fine, I had, after Back to the Future had come out, I had certain questions about the moral that was given in the film because of the material reward. I had not been shown the screenplay before I accepted to do the movie. I was 20 years old, and they were being secretive about their screenplay. I had only read one scene, which was the scene I auditioned with, and I didn't even know I was playing the older. That I was auditioning for a character that was going to play the older and younger characters. It was my agent that told me on the phone, because I asked if there was another part that I should audition for, because I was reading, opposite of another character, and I asked my agent, I'd gotten the offer, and I said, should I ask them to audition for the other part? It seems like the other part could be interesting. And my agent said, no, you don't understand, you're going to play the older and younger version of this in different times. And I said, wow, that sounds amazing. Great. Sign me up. It sounds great. And I'm not saying I regret it. I'm very glad. It was a good part and a good character to play. But because of this and because of training, you do have to understand what the psychology of the character is and what the outcome, what that's going to, how the audience is going to be perceiving this. And I had questions about that specific moral, which caused some, they didn't like that I was asking those questions. Nonetheless, I did not appear in the sequels. There was a lawsuit because they put prosthetics on another actor to make them look like me and fool audiences into believing that I was in the sequels, which is illegal. And because of my lawsuit, there are rules in the Screen Actors Guild that make it so actors and directors can never do anything like that again. Nonetheless, I had, in the 80s and 90s after that, I felt like I should really find material that I reflected what my psychological interests were. And the first film that I acted in after Back to the Future came out was the one we were talking about a bit earlier, River's Edge, which again is a film that I'm still very proud of. And I do like the psychological interior and the moral quality of the film and the cinematic quality of the film. But I then recognized I was able to shoot the film with the money that I made from working in Charlie's Angels. Previous to that, in the 80s and 90s, I turned down a lot of work. I was looking for stuff that would somehow reflect my psychological interests. And I worked with interesting directors and interesting characters. A lot of those films didn't make that much money. That was not necessarily that good for my acting career. But I don't regret the time period. It kind of forged a persona, as I was talking a bit about before, that still is with me essentially, and I'm relatively comfortable with that today. But I recognized that I needed, after Charlie's Angels came out, it made a lot of money, and that was good for my acting career. And like Willard came along, that's not, I would have not gotten that offer had I not been in a large money-making film. So I recognized I needed to shift my thought process about how I was taking roles. I needed essentially to make as much money as I could as an actor in order to finance my own filmmaking, and that's what I've done to this from the year 2000 forward. I'm forgetting what the original question was now. There was a particular point I was going towards, but I've lost. I went into I don't know.
You went down a rabbit hole, and you have a noticeable lack of appearances in sequels. Back to the Future, okay, that's one thing. But there's Hot Tub Time Machine 2, Alice in Wonderland. I guess they're making a new one. Are you fickle with working in films, or are you hard to work with?
No, I like well, I was in the sequel to Charlie's Angels, and I've worked with David Lynch multiple times. I would have loved to have been in both the sequels for Hot Tub Time Machine and Alice in Wonderland. There was discussion, both of them had a certain amount of discussion. The Hot Tub Time Machine, they had a much lower budget than the original film, and I think what happened was there was a much longer draft, or a different draft, that John Cusack wasn't in the film, and I think what I was told was they had written a story that had much more integration of my character with the John Cusack character, and I had a great time working on that film with Steve Pink, the director, and all the actors in it. I believe they didn't. I'm not sure of the whole thing. I saw John Cusack tweeted that he didn't get the offer for the film at all. I think what happened, and I had worked with John Cusack again, and they changed the title, or so I'm forgetting the title of it. I think it's The Messenger in England and The Bagman in America with Robert De Niro. And I talked with him on the set about that. He was asking me if I would want to do the sequel again, and I said I definitely would. And, I thought I'd see him on the set for that film after we wrapped on The Bagman. But I had emails with both Steve Pink and Rod Corddry. I think Rod Corddry had something to do with the writing. I loved working with both of them. Rod Corddry's really a funny and interesting fellow. And but what I was told was that my character was highly integrated with the John Cusack character. I don't know what happened with his offer. I saw he tweeted that he didn't get the offer at all. I think they knew maybe he has a quote. This I don't know. I'm just guessing. And that it was going to be expensive to have him in it, and that they didn't have the budget. I'm only guessing. This I really don't know. But he wasn't in the film, and then that meant that my character, they had to rewrite the script. I think they thought they were going to have a higher budget at first, and they got a lower budget than what the script was written for. And so they had to rework the whole thing. And then, so I was even in the last week of while they were shooting, I was having emails with Steve Pink, where they wanted to bring my character in maybe to be in the Civil War or something. I was game for any of it. But I think they were having trouble even shooting what they had in their script. And I was in the Czech Republic, and it just didn't happen. I would have loved to have been in it, though.
What a shame, because Hot Tub Time Machine, I think it's a great movie. It's just I had
a fun time working on it. I really liked working with everybody on it. And same thing with Alice in Wonderland. I would have loved to have been in it. Working with Tim Burton was great. All the actors, it was great. They had asked my agent, I guess it was last year, for my availability for October. I think it was last year or the year before last, or last year. I'm forgetting now. But which meant that my character was written into a draft of the screenplay. And I was, of course, very excited and happy to hear that. And then I was acting in something else, or I had an offer for something else. I asked my agent, this might conflict with Alice in Wonderland sequel, and he said, I'm going to check on that and see. And when he checked, the character was no longer in it. There's a million reasons why this kind of thing could happen. I mean, it could be anything. Sure, it could be somebody hates me. I don't think that's what it is, though. Usually it has to do with budgetary constraints, or there's a structural element, or who knows what. I'm very glad that I was in the film and worked with all those people, and I'm just glad to have been in it. So I would have loved to have been in the sequel, but I'm just already honored that I got to work with all the people that I worked with on the film.
Would you ever consider appearing in a Back to the Future reboot or a fourth installment in the series?
That's a very different story, because there was an illegal action that took place. It's too bad, because let's just pretend that only the first film had been made, which was what I was contracted to do. If that was the only film that had been made, and we're all these years later, and I had those questions or whatever, all of that would be forgotten. I would, I'd go and take pictures at the reunions, and it would be a very happy affair. All of this would be, none of these discussions, of course, there wouldn't have been a lawsuit, all of this. And I am, even with all of this, I am glad that I'm in that film. But, unfortunately, the producers decided to do something illegal when we didn't come to an agreement on they didn't have a contract with me, and they stole, it's complicated in a certain way, but they put prosthetics on another actor's face that were taken from the molds that were made of my face from the original film, for the old age makeup in the original film, and then had the actor look at footage of me, and then interspliced a very small amount of footage of me from the original film with this other actor playing 99% of the part in order to fool people into believing that I was in the movie. This is highly illegal and damaging. It's an awful thing to do and an awful thing to go through. And I'm the only person that's ever had that happen. There's nobody I can talk to that goes, yeah, I know what you mean. That's really not fun. But it isn't, I promise you. And so because of that, if I were to appear in anything that advertises the films in any way, I'm essentially sponsoring the illegal actions that happened, and I can't do that. So that would be the one thing that I would not be able to be a part of, unfortunately.
You know, prosthetics are one thing, but now with computers and digital technology, you could very soon, if not now, completely recreate an actor.
And in fact, an interesting coincidence is I did work with Robert Zemeckis again on Beowulf, which was a very positive experience. And not only did I like the moral value of the film, which essentially was that lies are bad, it was written by Roger Avery and Neil Gaiman, who are very excellent writers and structuralists and have good, strong moral integrity. And I had a really excellent experience working with Robert Zemeckis on that film. And ultimately, in retrospect, like I say, if Back to the Future had just been that movie, that was ultimately an excellent experience as well. It happened subsequently to that was not excellent. But I worked with Robert Zemeckis using a technology where your face is put into a computer. All of the scenes, Angelina Jolie plays my mother, and Anthony Hopkins played my father, and we're all acting in what they called volume, I think, in a stage that had a complete 360 degrees camera that has every actor in close-up and master shot, and all the increments in between, all at the same time. It was actually an interesting acting element, and I was getting to work with all of these great actors, and Ray Winstone played Beowulf. It was really a great experience. But your face is in a computer, and with the technology, even to this day, if that digital technology is saved, your face could be taken and reworked to do anything that the person with the digital technology wanted to do with that. And specifically, not only because of my lawsuit, because it was actually illegal before my lawsuit, but my lawsuit has made very specific status so it's very clear to anybody involved that that would be totally illegal. A contract would have to be made for anything like that to be to be done.
We're entering into a time where actors could just license their image.
Well, that does happen. That's been happening for decades. Marilyn Monroe, I believe, has the most lucrative image, post-mortem image. Her estate went to her acting teacher. I'm forgetting his name right now. The man that coined the word method acting is not
Leo Strasberg, isn't it? Or,
Strasberg, right? That's correct.
Yeah.
Which is really a subsection of Stanislavski. But in any case, he coined the term method, which is kind of an overused term and misunderstood term. But nonetheless, his children, I believe, are enormously wealthy because they're in control of the Marilyn Monroe estate. And it's a huge, millions and millions of dollars go into the licensing of Marilyn Monroe's image every year. And, of course, she's not the only one. But that's been going on for a long time.
I'm saying an actor wouldn't even have to act. They could just sign over their rights and they put it through the computers and they're in this movie, but they actually never acted one scene in this film.
That's correct. As long as there's a a contract. That would, you can definitely negotiate it. That was the thing that the producers of Back to the Future did that was illegal. Had they negotiated with foreknowledge the use of my face, well, I mean, I would have not granted that, because I would not want. The thing that's the most upsetting about it all is that I did not like the performance that the actor gave, and I would have not given the performance that the actor gave. And people believe that was, even to this day, people think that's my performance. That's the most upsetting thing of all. Because what are you? What are you if that's, as an actor? You're performing something, and people believe they were fooling people, and still to this day, unfortunately, people watch that film and think this is Crispin Glover, and it's not. It still upsets me. It's not a happy thing for me to talk and think about, but that's the truth of it. When the lawsuit started, what I initially wanted to have happen was for my image to be removed from the film. The lawyer who was representing me said that this would essentially be, who knows? I don't really know, but he said this would be an unlikely thing to have happen, and that it should just be a standard lawsuit that was for, a financial resolution. I would prefer for that film to have been reshot with a different actor playing the character. That's what they did with the other character that wasn't. There's an actress in the film that was in the first film that wasn't in the second film. They just had a different actress play the character, which would have been, of course, the girl that played Jennifer, the actress that played Jennifer, the girlfriend to the Marty McFly character, was played by Claudia Wells in the first film and by Elizabeth Shue in the second and I believe third film. So it was not mandatory for them to do what they did, and also the negotiation. It wasn't like a quick negotiation. There were years between when Back to the Future was shot and the sequel to Back to the Future, and they knew that literally years before they came up with the script, there had already been discussion about me either being or not being in the film. And they knew with forethought that I was not in agreement at the point that they wrote the character in such depth into the movie. They did not have to do that. So it was their choice to write the script in the way that it was written, with foreknowledge that essentially what they did was write it in such a way that they could do this illegal action. It was done with forethought. There would be no other way for them to do it. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, and I was part of the process specifically on that film, so I know exactly what they did and the order of which it was done, and it was a very bad thing they did. To put it simply.
We're here with Crispin Glover. Just a couple of questions left. Crispin's always very generous with his time, not just with me, but with his fans. He's going to be at the American Cinematheque Egyptian Theater Friday and Saturday. That's March 18th and 19th at 6712 Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. Knowing Crispin, he would spend a lot of time with the fans after the show, signing books, answering questions, I'm sure. He's a great guy. Just a couple of questions left. We have one here from the audience. During the filming of Friday the 13th 5, brilliant film, of course, he reportedly held up shooting because he lost his antique toy boat in the lake. He raved and carried on like Klaus Kinski, while the director had to put the crew in scuba gear and wetsuits to look for it. Any truth to this story?
No. The first time I heard about that was I was on some kind of talk show thing, and somebody brought up a quote that Corey Feldman had written in a book that he called Choreography. I do know Corey Feldman, and he was in Friday the 13th, Part 4, which I was in, and he was, I don't know, 9 years old or something. And I got the sense that he was having a little bit of a rough time as a kid. I didn't know many details or anything. I always kind of felt bad for him. And I've known him throughout, and he's a nice fellow. I always get along with him. I don't know exactly what his true memory of it is or how much he's embellishing. I do remember what he's talking about. I had a little plastic submarine, I don't know, probably like $2 or something, that had some kind of a pellet in it that it would go up and down. I'm a professional actor. I know I would be fired if I were to hold up shooting on any level at all. I think there were some ADs that helped me find it. I was hardly concerned about it. It was like we were right by a big pond, but it certainly didn't hold up shooting. I mean, it was just some little stupid toy that I was playing with. But I think, you know, he's written a book and he's selling a book, and to a certain extent he's writing things to be kind of sensational, and I haven't read the whole book, but I was on the
that's
talk
concerning to me, because some of the stuff he says about Corey Haim, and, you know, we're not going to go into that, but that kind of delegitimizes some of his other claims, right?
Well, I don't, you know, I don't know. But I mean, it really, that isn't the truth. You know, I've seen so many things written about me over the years that are not truthful, and it is part of why I'm writing the book a little bit, because I can see why people believe some of these things, because of certain characters that I played or the public persona. But I mean, I'm a business person that's been working in the industry since I was 13 years old. I've done well. If I was enough, done well enough. If I was genuinely troublesome and problem-causing, I've been in over 50 films. I mean, it's a small industry. That kind of thing would get around, and I wouldn't work. And I've been working for all of this time. So, you know, I'm not about to go get into, like, lawsuits. Having the lawsuit with Back to the Future was enough. I don't want to do a whole bunch of stuff. It's unfortunate. I see it all the time. People believe virtually anything about me, unfortunately. It isn't, I mean, even if it was like my want to, like, cause a commotion or something, my interest as an actor is to concentrate and to make sure that I can deliver the best performance possible. I am not interested in causing controversy, trouble, whatever. That's the last of my wants. It would be hard. I think somebody has got to be on some level in the business, specifically in acting. It's like if you cause true frivolous problems on the set, it will negatively affect your performance. The best performance that you can do is going to come from a concentrated, good, fun set where you're working at all, you know, the best, all pistons firing. You do not want conflict. You do not want controversy. This is how I've always worked. Now, it's true. I'll fight for an artistic position, but not to the point where it's going to cause a disruption. I know professionally where you start and stop. It's fair professionally to, you know, sit with the director privately, ask questions, have discussions, If there's something you're really passionate about, go for it. And then at a certain point, if a director says, no, look, I understand what you're saying, but it's got to be this way, then you do it because that's what you're contracted to do. And normally, that it doesn't even get to any kind of thing like that, but it's professional and fair to have that kind of discussion in the proper time and place. It's not good to be like yelling on the set or having random arguments. I mean, the idea of like having a production shut down, it doesn't. I mean, the story doesn't make sense. Having to do with I didn't have an antique submarine, but no production would shut down to find a toy. It just wouldn't happen. They'd go, Crispin, come to set. And you go, okay. They would not shut the production down to find a submarine in the lake. It's just, no way would that happen. So he was a kid. He's gone through a lot. I like Corey Feldman. I don't have any problem with him. He may have some kind of memory that he's embellished for real, or he may be embellishing for the sake of the writing. I don't know. It isn't true. I don't want to get into some big problem. It's like, I've seen so many things written about me that are incorrect. It would not be worth going into that kind of thing, particularly not legally. It's just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's a minor thing. You've obviously worked with a lot of brilliant actors. We have somebody here talking about super creepy scene. Again, that word creepy from Wild at Heart. I'm trying to make my lunch. Who's the best actor you've ever worked with? And not to single anyone out, maybe give me two or three.
Well, I've worked with a lot of great actors, and there would be a lot of actors that I probably wouldn't be mentioning that are excellent actors. For some reason, I don't know why, I get very impressed by a lot of the British actors when I worked with them. Vanessa Redgrave played my mother in an adaptation of Crime and Punishment. And the film itself is flawed, but she played my mother, and she's done some phenomenal performances in her life, and she's always great. This would not be one of the things you'd put down saying, you've got to see Vanessa Redgrave as Rodion, forgetting the name of, I played Rodion, why can't I think of the name of the character in Crime and Punishment? Raskolnikov. She played Raskolnikova, at least that's the Czech way of saying it. Maybe the Russian's a little bit different. Anyhow, she plays the mother of my character in it. And just watching her work, the way that she worked, kind of a little bit what I was talking about a few seconds ago, you want the concentration and the way of playing with the character to be in the moment, spontaneous fun. And it was very interesting watching her off camera, because often what an actor is doing when they're working off camera, I'm very much of the philosophy, you want your acting partner to be the best that they can be, and you want to do everything that you can do to make them as good as possible. Most actors are like that. I've really very rarely seen it. If you're working professionally, if you're not of that philosophy, you're not going to work for very long. You've got to be supporting your fellow actors. And usually, and it's done with the best intentions, but usually when an actor does off camera, it's always a hard thing because you're not on camera. The other person's in a close-up. It's part of what was interesting about the technology that was used by Robert Zemeckis in Beowulf was because every actor is in close-up and master at the same time, so every take is full-on, full force, full concentration from each actor. It's actually very good for acting. When you're off camera, you're often having to place your face as close as possible to the lens, which is incongruous to what you've just played, so that the eye line of the actor that's on camera is close to the lens. It looks better cinematically. So you want them to look good, and you want to be delivering your lines in a way that they're still having good things to react from, that's organic to the way that you played it in the master and two shots or wide shots. And so you're doing your best, but it's going to be a little bit different from what you did previously, and you want to match essentially. What I found very interesting, and sometimes it can be distracting, like it just isn't the same, and you don't want to distract the other actor because you know yourself, when you're on camera, you do not want to be distracted. You want to have the same kind of organic concentration that you had when it wasn't put in that situation. But what I noticed about Vanessa Redgrave is that when she was off camera, she was still exploring what was going on with her character. So she was not necessarily matching what she had done, which was, it was very interesting because I found it fascinating to watch what she was doing, but it's not what most actors do because you don't want to distract your acting partner by differentiating from what you had done before. But she was not you could have an actor, if they were a bad spirited actor, that would be doing something purposefully to do off-camera work. Like I say, I've not experienced that. I've heard stories of it, but professional actors don't do that. It's not done. But she wasn't doing it. She was doing it because she was a great actress. And so I found myself like, and it probably ultimately was good because I found myself lost in thinking about what she was doing off camera in a different way from how I performed it, which is actually ultimately really great acting on her part. In a certain way, she's the most interesting actor I've ever watched work. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily my best film or anything. It's a highly flawed movie, but it was a very interesting experience watching it. There's I very much like working with John Hurt was in the same film. He played Porfiry, the detective that's after Raskolnikov. He's another actor I have enormous respect for, and actually those scenes are probably the best scenes in the film, the least flawed scenes. Those scenes work very well. So it was great working with him. But so there's something about those British actors that it's a little bit different than the American actors. And I find myself quite impressed with the British actors a lot.
It's an election year. I've been asking all my guests, what are your thoughts on the current presidential election? Is there anyone you're particularly endorsing? Any thoughts that come to mind?
Yeah, there's a part of me that hates to be political. I hate politics on some level, and I hate it when actors talk about politics. But my film, What Is It, is a reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 years or more of filmmaking. And when the Occupy movement came around, I recognized that they were reacting to exactly the same thing that I started reacting to 20 years ago now when I started turning What Is It into a feature film. It's been 20 years. And I was reacting to these corporate constraints that happen in film. What you're watching when you're watching a corporately funded and distributed film is carefully controlled information that is only put forth if a corporation feels like it's going to somehow fit within what their needs are politically. And, there's a lot of talk about money, legalized bribery, essentially, that's going into the pockets of politicians to alter taxes and all kinds of governmental policies that favor corporate interests and disfavor lower and middle classes. And this is something Bernie Sanders has specifically been talking about, and he's talking about it in terms of business. I'm talking about it in terms of art, but I agree completely 100%. So, whether he wins or not, he's getting a very important message out that is very close to what I've been talking about for more than 20 years, and I would very much like to see him win this. It would mean a lot to me. Though, he's done a great service to this information getting out, and there's something I've seen in the last 10 years from what when I first started touring with What Is It and talking about propaganda, a difference in the way audiences are responding to what I'm talking about. People are way more aligned to seeing that I'm talking about something that's very important, and that propaganda is doing a disservice to the lower and middle classes, and it's only helping the corporate interests. And it's very detrimental. Corporate interests don't have to do that. Corporations can be good for people, but there is an out-of-balance quality that's been happening for quite some time, and I started reacting to it many years ago, and I'm very glad to see that this is becoming highly organized and aware, and it's understood this needs to be stopped. Actually, even more important, perhaps, than who becomes elected as president, although I do think it would be very good if that happens for Bernie Sanders to win the election. But even if he doesn't, I'm very glad that I think he could. I think people are recognizing that his opponents are very involved in the corporate propaganda industry, and that Bernie Sanders has been careful, obviously, for decades. There's other good things as well, being on the right side of, equal rights for all kinds of people, which is positive. But for me specifically, the element of being aware about corporate interest hurting the lower and middle classes and disenfranchised people at large is extremely important. And people that have been traditionally essentially bamboozled with the propaganda that exists in the media to be voting for people and elements that are against their own good. And the fact that this is starting to be recognized in a gigantic political forum is so positive. There's also an amendment that's being proposed to get money out of politics, because we essentially have a legalized bribery, which is not democratic, and we've been taught, which is arguable, that we're living in a democracy. We're not living in a true functioning democracy, but we could. And the way for that to happen is or a step to make that happen is to pass an amendment, which every generation passes, but this generation hasn't. And the most important amendment to pass is getting money out of politics. There's a website called wolf-pac.org. Go up and sign up for that, or at least explore it. This is, like I say, I think it's even more important than who is elected as president. But the fact that Bernie Sanders is talking about this stuff, I also think Elizabeth Warren, who's not running for president right now, also is on the good side of this. I'd love to see it for Bernie Sanders to get the nomination and for her to become the vice presidential nominee, because they both are very on top of the corporate tyranny. I use words that are probably more provocative, but it's an out-of-balance problem. Corporations have way too much influence on what public policy is, as opposed to the lower and middle classes that are being essentially taken for money and being put in a much worse physical and financial and living situation than they should be. It's not fair for the way the wealth has been redistributed in the last however many decades toward this upper 1%. And it's fine for the upper 1% to have wealth, but it's not fair for there to be so much disparity and to not be paying the fair amount of taxes, and particularly the way corporations are utilizing the people to their own benefit and not letting the people enjoy a fair standard of living. And my films are integrated with this in terms of the kind of information that's put forward in corporately funded and distributed film. By and large, 99.9% of that which comes out is to help corporate interests maintain their control, to help make people feel comfortable with the corporate interests that are taking control, and not having people questioning corporate interests. That's what I was talking about when I say it's important for films to cause people to ask questions for real and to become informed for real and educated for real, so that they know that they can have a proper balance with corporate interests. It's okay for corporations to exist, but the reason they exist is because people make them work. And it's not fair for the corporations to have more control over the policy that's detrimental to the people at large. And this is a great message. I've been talking about this for decades now, and I'm so happy that Bernie Sanders is getting this out in such a large platform. And whether, like I say, whether he wins or not, I think he could. I think it's coming through. People are realizing this guy is actually out for your own best interests. And I would even argue, I'm in the position financially where at least sometimes, some years, I would be in the tax situation where I'd be taxed more. I know that it would be better to be taxed more if the entire culture is in a better situation, because I will benefit from that, as would anybody in any kind of capacity. I can't understand the thought process of somebody that thinks it's better to make the people in a lower or middle class worse off for a very minute differentiation for yourself. I mean, you've got to go out and walk around in the street, or I guess maybe somebody's holed up in some utopia that they want to keep funding. I don't know what the thought process is, but I'm very glad that this is becoming an awareness, and it is an important issue. I hope people will continue to inform themselves about that specifically. And I think particularly young people that are looking on the internet, it's part of why they're becoming more informed. The control of the propaganda is lessening. People can go on and see all of these people, podcasts like we're having right now, and see that there's something outside of what the corporate interest-controlled media is stating, and that's very positive. And I can see the differences even at my own shows, and certainly with what's happening with Bernie Sanders. So I feel very aligned toward what's going on there, and I'm glad that's happening. Ultimately, it's about art, though. I hate politics. I would have never thought about politics for a second, but I could see that it affects the content of when you're acting or working on a film, and that it becomes a kind of a lie, and that's not a good thing. And I would have never, ever wanted to think about this stuff at all if I didn't see it affecting that, but it does. It affects it very badly. And, of course, the more general elements of what are being talked about in Bernie Sanders' campaign, which are true, is that it affects particularly the lower and middle classes in a very negative way. And, of course, that's the majority of the people. So I think that's why it's genuinely plausible that a majority of the people will recognize that this is true, and that if we get that in office, and particularly, like I said, an amendment that will truly reprimand the possibilities of banks and corporations from influencing policy, it's going to be much better to have a true functioning democracy where people vote about issues that they're happy to have their children educated well, to have good, all of these things that Bernie Sanders is talking about are, from what I can tell, right on the money. Like, and this idea that where the money is going to come from, perhaps the United States becoming a more pacifist nation and not spending literally trillions of dollars on wars. There's got to be a better way. Taking a small amount of that money and educating people in a true fashion, and would be a much better use of money than bombs and wars and scaring people into believing that's a good idea. So anyhow, I hate to be one of these actors talking about politics, but this in particular is an issue I've been talking about with my films for many, literally decades now. So I'm so happy that people I can see are really tuning into it, and that's a very positive thing.
Wonderful interview once again with Crispin Glover. Crispin, once again, he's performing at the American Cinematheque Egyptian Theater this weekend, March 18th and 19th.
Oh, actually, I keep forgetting to mention that Tulsa. I'll be in Tulsa the following weekend, and there's going to be some more shows posted soon. So people should sign up on the newsletter on crispinglover.com. And it will, and they can also look at it. But the best way to know is to get that newsletter, and it lets people know when and where. I've also got a Twitter, a Facebook page, or 2 Facebook pages, and Instagram as well. But CrispinGlover.com definitively always has that information in the newsletter as well.
So there will be more opportunities. But for those in and around the Los Angeles area, go to this. How big is the venue?
I believe it's a 500-seat venue.
Very intimate. And one last question, I guess I've said that a few times, is the book, Round My House, is that going to be available on Amazon, or is it strictly a limited release?
Well, I also put it out through my website. It is an official publication, meaning when I started my publishing company, Volcanic Eruptions, what makes an official publication is something called an ISBN number, which is a serial number. They used to put in a big book called Books in Print, and every bookstore had it, and if you wanted to order a book, you said, I want to order this ISBN number. So in that fashion, yes, it can be available. Now the borders of brick mortar houses for selling books has become, the way to buy books really is buying it online. And buying it directly from me, there's different discounts. I always recommend people either come to my shows or buy it on my website. But, they could theoretically buy these books through Amazon, but they should just buy it from me. It's a better deal for them, and it's just probably easier.
Crispin Glover, thank you once again for being a guest on the program.
Thank you, too. Appreciate it. Have a great day.